Hey friends, Dylan Bates here with the Final Cut Bro. Although today I'm more so the Motion 5 Bro because we are going to be taking an in-depth look at how to use Motion 5 and just kind of starting from beginner to mildly advanced avenues of Motion 5. So this is not going to be a short tutorial. I'm going to be going really in depth on a lot of stuff. So if you're looking for a short tutorial, this is probably not the place for you, but I will have timestamps within this video, so if you need to skip around and maybe jump to a different section, you can do that. So let's go ahead and open up Motion and get started. Okay, so we've got Motion open, and this is the first screen you're going to be faced with most of the time when you open up Motion. And this is what's called your project browser. Now, you can open up any old projects or, even plugins and stuff that you've purchased and installed. You can open all of that over here on the left-hand side. And in my opinion, it's really terribly sorted and organized, but, maybe Apple will fix that someday. Moving on over here, we've got different types of Motion projects. Now, the original Motion project here, this is going to not tie into Final Cut in any way, shape, or form. This is just a standalone project. However, if you need to make something like a effect, a generator, transition, or title, you'll want to select one of these other project types. Now let's say that you forgot to select one of these. I can show you a way to fix that a little bit down the road in this tutorial, so have no fear. So today we're actually just going to be working with the Motion project, so you can select that. Now I will show you a few other things before we dive in. If you come down here to the bottom, you can actually select Open Other, and you can open any other Motion type project, or you can push Import as Project, and this is actually a very handy feature. If you select Import as Project, it will give you this kind of window, and you can navigate and find any video or photo, anything like that, and it will dynamically set the parameters of the file to work accordingly. So it'll set the frame rate, the resolution, everything according to how the video file is within here. Alternatively, if you have a time lapse, you can actually create a time lapse using this feature. So unfortunately, I just took a quick look. I don't have any time lapses to work with right now, but you can select multiple photos by just holding Shift and selecting all those. You can push Options, and then can actually select Image Sequence, and this will create a time lapse of all of your photos, which is really handy, and you can set your frame rate here and all of that. So strongly suggest you try that out, but that will be for another tutorial. All right, so we're gonna cancel that, and I'm gonna just open up Motion here. So I closed it. Oh no, where's my project browser? You can just come up to File, New from Project Browser. So now that we've selected our Motion project, over here on the right, we can set the resolution, the frame rate, and the duration. Now you can change later on the actual resolution, and you can change the duration of the project, but you cannot change the frame rate, at least as far as I am aware. If somebody else happens to know otherwise, that would be really nice to know. So I just like to leave my duration at 10 seconds because I can set it to however long I need to later on, but I feel like 10 seconds is a good base. Now that we have our Motion project selected, let's go ahead and open up Motion. So here is Motion, and it might look a bit daunting at first, but it's just like any other program where you just got to dive in, start using it, and over time you will actually be able to navigate it quite easily. And honestly, compared to like After Effects or something, Motion is far easier to navigate. So it's really not too bad. You just have to kind of relearn a few things. But it's somewhat like Final Cut in some ways, and so you should be able to easily transfer over. So I'm going to just break down each of these panels, and this might get a little mundane, but stick with me, or you can just jump ahead in the time codes down below. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to look at is the Layers panel here, and actually I believe this is called the Project Pane. But this is where you're going to be able to see all of your layers, and let's see if I have two of these. You can move the layers according to where you want them to show up. So if you want something on top or bottom, you can move them around just like that. You can also see your project here, and if you select that, you can come over to the inspector, the properties, and you can actually change like your resolution here, projection type. If you're working 360, you don't need to do that. You can just change any of these settings within here, which is really nice. And if you want to change your background color, so you're working with white or something like that, you can do that. And later on, I can show you how to add motion blur to your project, but this is where you would set your motion blur samples and all of that. So yeah, just select your project, go to the inspector, go to properties. From here, when you select any layer, you will be able to come to the inspector and you will be able to change the transform properties, rotation, all of that. Your blend modes are here, which is really handy, drop shadow. Also, when we add what's called a behavior, you'll be able to work with that here. Your filters, which is just think of it as like an Instagram filter or something along those lines. And the group. This is something you definitely won't need to bother with right now, but it is there if you need it in the future. The next part we're going to look at is the canvas. Now, the canvas is essentially where you're going to be viewing your project. Now, after you've added a lot of layers and whatnot, it can really slow down your computer dramatically. So if you need to fix that, you can come on up here to the upper right, click on render, and you can set the quality to dynamic if you want. And then you can set it to half or quarter, whatever you need to do to get through your project at the smoothest frame rate possible. You can also enable or disable lighting, shadows, reflections, and like I said, you can have motion blur, and this is where you would enable motion blur for your project. I strongly suggest that you wait till closer to the end because motion blur is very, very CPU intensive, and so it's when you're working with a lot of layers and stuff, it's going to tank your computer. So wait till the end to enable that, but you can do that here. Okay, so you can also set your view type here, and I actually like to leave it at fit. You can actually push Shift Z and that will fit it, or you can push Command minus or plus to zoom in, and you just have to make sure you have this panel selected by clicking on it. Okay, so we've got our canvas here, and if you come to the bottom, you actually have a lot of tools here. So you can select your mouse type down here. There's a lot of options that I can't really get into all of them today, but the main important ones are typically transform, the anchor point tool, and that's kind of mostly what you'll be working with. And a lot of the other ones come automatically when you're working with some other options. So no need to stress there. Coming over to the right, this is essentially where you will be working with like shapes and masks. Both are extremely important within motion. So if you need like a basic shape, like a circle, we can click and hold on that, drag, and if you push shift, it will lock it to a 1:1 aspect ratio. Then we can select our arrow. We can move this around. We can rotate it, which doesn't help with a circle that's perfectly symmetrical, and so forth. Moving from there, if we want to do like a more intricate shape, say we wanted to make a really terrible star, which is what I'm about to do, so buckle up. We can select the Bezier tool here, or you can click and drag and work with the B-spline, but I have never used the B-spline, so honestly I don't even really know what to do there. But if we just create like a star shape, this is going to look really bad, so just bear with me. Okay, boom. Oh my goodness, don't look at that. So anyway, so we've got this terrible star shape here, which if you're going to make a star, I strongly recommend you just use the library that we'll get into a little bit later. Okay, so we have our star shape. We have our circle shape. Okay, from there, we actually have this cool paintbrush tool. If you select that, we can draw something. So let's see if we want to do like waves. I don't know what we're doing. We can write hello, where is it? There we go. So we'll just write hello with the paintbrush tool. You can do that. And then we have our text tool, and you got 3D text or just regular text, and you can actually set your text to 3D later on, so there's no need to select the 3D text unless you absolutely need it right off. And so we can just click anywhere and subscribe. There we go. That's even better. So we'll type subscribe. And And then you can actually work with that within the inspector over here, which I'll show a little bit later. The last thing is going to be these masks. So let me get into the arrow here. Let's select our circle, and we can select the mask tool, and I can create a rectangle mask there. And then if we want to work with this mask, we can actually come on up here to the top right, click HUD, and then come down, and we've got some mask tools here. You can also do the same thing over here in the inspector panel. So whichever is easier. But this HUD is really nice for just quick access if you want it really close by. And let's say we want to invert the mask so that the mask is on the inside. We can do that. We can feather it, set the roundness, do all of that. You can also do it directly on the mask here. If I set the size here, and we can drag out the feather like so. So you can do all of that. If you want a more intricate mask, which is like a draw mask in Final Cut, let's say we select our star here. We'll click and hold, and we have all these other different types. I usually use the Bezier mask, but you know, there's different uses for different cases. So if we wanted to just do a really terrible, oh my goodness, here's just a weird shape. Okay, so then we'll just turn on our HUD here, and we can set it to invert. You can do all of that here, and it's very handy. You can set your color, so sometimes you're working against a background that's like already red and it's hard to see your selection, so that can be handy. Okay, so that's a basic overlook at your canvas and your mask options and all that, and you can see all the layers that are here. Now, this is an absolute mess. What if we want to put all of this into a singular group? Well, when you first start, it actually has a default group, and you can rename that to absolute trash. And I just did that by selecting it, pushing return or enter, and it will let you rename it. You can also right click, I believe, maybe. Nope. You can double click on it. Yeah, you can double click on it, and you can lock it here. I have no idea what that does, honestly. I'm sorry. I have no clue. So that's something to learn a little later on, or somebody who's more experienced can maybe comment down below. Anyway, I don't know why I'm teaching this. Okay, we can actually select all these with shift, and we can right click, and we can group that, and that will create a group within the group, and it's kind of like an inception thing. And so we can move that group around separately. And then if we wanted to move the entire group, we just select the larger group. You can also grab this group and drag it. And you see how it's got that kind of thin blue line? That means it'll plop it on the outside of our other group. So now we have two groups. And then if we wanted to duplicate this group, you could right click and go down to duplicate, or you could push Command D. And now we have two of the same group. Another great thing is you could do a clone group, which that's a little bit more advanced topic, but if you select it, you could push K or right click and do make clone layer. And that will, that'll essentially clone, let's see if I drag it over here, anything that happens within this group will happen to the clone layer. So you can see that O is moving and stuff, which can be helpful for, you know, having colors transfer over or whatever. There's a bunch of reasons that you might want to use that. Okay, so that's essentially how you get around the canvas, and that's a little bit more work with the project pane. Let's go ahead and take a look into the library. Now, the library has a massive quantity of stuff that you can use. I strongly suggest that if you have some time, maybe just take a quick look at this. Now, mostly you'll be kind of using anything from the behaviors down to like maybe 3D objects. The gradients, fonts, and all that stuff actually comes within the inspector a lot of the time, so you won't need to worry about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of our generators. Now, generators, you might be using quite a bit, but the one I will probably use the most is oftentimes the cloud generator. And that's because, let's see, I'll just search up clouds, and you can see there's this search functionality at the bottom, which is really nice. So essentially now this generator is here, but we can jump into the inspector and change all of the attributes. So I actually did this for a heat wave tutorial, but you can change these accordingly, and you can make a different type of mask that will show only the white areas and not the black areas on an image or something. And I can get all into that a little bit later. But yeah, it's really handy for just kind of being able to push the generator around however you need to. And the publish OSC stands for publish on screen controls. And so if you want to throw this over into Final Cut, that is a handy feature. Again, that's something a little bit more advanced in the rigging side. Hopefully I can get into that within this tutorial. I don't know. It's going to be a long one. So anyway, so we've got our clouds here, and we've got our width and all of that we can mess around with, and we can jump the speed up here. If we're playing it, we can actually work with it in real time here. So you can change things up, and now the clouds look a little bit more like water or something like that. And you can set your offsets, all of that. So that can be handy. Now, okay, so real quick, almost any attribute, basically all attributes are animatable, which is very, very nice. If you want to animate something, you'll just have to push the keyframe button here. That will create a keyframe. It'll turn the attribute red. You can move anywhere within your timeline, and we can add another keyframe. And you'll see down here in the keyframe editor, it actually shows that keyframe that we have just created. And you can mess around with the keyframes in any way, shape, or form down here. So now, if we want to animate this, we can jump to the next keyframe, just like in Final Cut, and drag that down. And now that will animate itself accordingly. Also, if you want a really fast way to animate a lot of different attributes, one way to do that is to push this record button. And now any changes you make will be recorded. So let's say if we want to go here, we can pull that, we can move it over, and now all of that has been animated very, very quickly without me having to come over here and create keyframes for each individual thing. And honestly, this little thing I just made is revolutionary. Like, nobody has ever been able to create something that looks as cool as this. So congratulate me in the comments down below. Okay, moving on. So we can turn off the record keyframe feature here. If you want to delete a keyframe, you can do so by finding it up here, or you can select it down in the keyframe editor and delete that. Now, let's say you don't want to look at the keyframe editor. You can actually hide it by pushing this keyframe button. Now, another really handy feature is, let's say you've just totally ruined the animation and you hate it, you want to restart from scratch. You can select any keyframe here, click on this down arrow, and push reset parameter. And I'll just do that for everything there. And I've also affected the position properties with that record button. So we'll just reset everything. Okay, so now it should be set. Okay, so now that we have this really intriguing clouds effect, let's add a filter to it. So if we come on up to the top, you'll see your filters, which can also be found in the library. So whichever you prefer, whichever is easier for you, just work according to that. So up here at the top, we'll go to the filters, and they are all nicely organized. And you probably won't see this C2, that's from CoreMelt. It's just a plugin I have. So some of your plugins might show up in here. So if you don't see those, don't worry. Anyway, so if we come on down here, we can actually look at something like the stylize. Now, stylize has lots and lots of fun stuff. Let's do pixelate. And we go to our inspector. And if we come down here, we can actually see the pixelate filter working. And that has this nice on-screen control here, which if we publish OSC, that will be visible within Final Cut if we were to push this to Final Cut. So now we can actually work with the pixelation feature, and we could animate this too. Come down to the end, and now that will depixelify, which is kind of a cool, you can make a transition or something like that. Okay, so that is essentially how like basic animation works and how some filters work. We could add any number of filters on here. And let's see, I always like the bad TV. I way overuse it. So you can mess with the bad TV. Careful, that might actually give you a seizure. Sorry, people, I did not realize that's what that would do. So anyway, yeah, you can add any of these and you could stack them in different ways. And sometimes that'll provide you with a different effect. You'll see now the pixelate's happening over the top of the bad TV. So it's actually pixelifying the bad TV effect. So yeah, you can mess with that in any way you so desire, which is really nice. Another thing, if you are, wanting to work with these within the keyframe editor, you can push the down arrow and do show in keyframe editor, and then you can move it accordingly. You can also right click any of these and do a different interpolation. So let's do a Bezier curve. And now this will kind of smooth out the animation in a different way. Yeah, anyway, let's keep moving on. Let's go ahead and add some text and we'll do some fun stuff with that. Come down here to the bottom, click your text, and let's just type in subscribe. Perfect. And we can change the scale here. We could also add our HUD in if we wanted to work a little bit more efficiently. And I'll just drag this down here. Also, T will give you your text tool if you so desire. And from here, we can take our text, change our size, our tracking. And again, there are so many more options here than in Final Cut. So we can actually, this is kind of cool. You could animate your tracking here. And so now they'll just kind of be separating like that, which is something you sometimes see within, movie titles and stuff. You can do that. Okay, so one of the coolest things I love is the built-in animation presets for text and stuff. So if we select our subscribe button, we can come up to the behaviors and we can actually look at some of these nice animations that they've already created. So I really like to go through like the text settle. And we could let's try Puffin. I have no idea what this is going to look like, but this will automatically animate the text for me. And you can drag this out to make it as long as you want. So if you wanted a really slow subscribe to appear, or you could shrink it way down, it'll come on a lot faster. And you can actually apply these in multiple. So if I select another behavior and let's do text basic arrange in. And so now it has both happening at the same time. And we could drag these way out so you can really see it happening. So you can really get creative with this. And you can push the controls around a lot. So if we get over into here, we can change our face, outline, all of this, and just go crazy through extrusion depth. I don't even know what this does, but that's kind of how you learn. Oh yeah, so it makes the text 3D from there. So that is the really fun thing about these text animations. And let's see if we want to do blast in. We could add that too. And now we're getting a little crazy. I don't recommend doing this for like a feature film, but you can do it for whatever you want. So just have fun. Anyway, so that is something really cool with the text features, and it's really nice to be able to drag them out as long as you want and just slow it down to exactly what you need for your project. Let's go ahead and jump into maybe some particle stuff. So I'm going to delete that. Let's create ourselves a circle here. And I'll get this mic in a little closer. Okay, so we are going to create a circle. And we're done. No, go ahead and select your circle. And we are going to do make particles. And now, dang it, that's one annoying thing, is it creates it according to wherever your playhead is. So, okay, we've got our emitter, which is the circle. We can move this around to anywhere we need. There's your circle. So whatever we do to this circle will apply to the emitter all around. But if we come into the emitter, go to the emitter settings, we can actually play around with this a lot. So we could drag the speed way up. And one thing to note is, okay, so this goes up to 1,000. We can actually drag that beyond if you just click and drag up on it, or you can set in like its own number, and now it's just ridiculously fast. So that's something to note as well. Let's set the scale. Let's drag the scale way down and scale randomness way up. And then we can set the speed to something kind of fast. And now if we play through, you can see what this is all doing. So again, we can set the scale down, scale randomness, and now this is just going to keep creating more and more particles, which is kind of fun. And we can set the birth rate up ridiculously high and birth rate randomness. And let's set the speed randomness so they're kind of going at different speeds. And you can just get really, really creative with these emitters. I absolutely love working with emitters. We could change the additive blend so when they're over the top of each other, it actually adds the colors together and kind of makes it, you know, kind of glowy. We could change the opacity over life. So we could click on here and we'll set our opacity to 0. And so now they'll just kind of start to fade out. Their life is a little bit too long, so let's set their life way down. And so now you can see they're fading out. Again, this is something you just kind of need to play with on your own, but it can be really, really powerful. Another cool thing with this is we can change our emission angle. So let's say I want this to be just a really direct line. You can make like a jet stream, and then we want to change that direction that it's firing. Maybe we want it straight up. So you can get crazy creative with this. We can change our color mode to over life, which I love because, yeah, see, now we got this nice like additive blend and it's turning blue as it gets further away. And we could change the color. And the cool thing is again, this is all animatable. So if we wanted to, we could add a keyframe here, drag this through and turn it green. And this looks weird, but you can get as creative as you want with your animations and really take it to the next level. So that is something really cool with particle emitters, and I love particle emitters. I have so much fun with these. I actually have a tutorial on creating an audio visualizer using a particle emitter, and you can check that out. And so as the music's going, the particles are kind of coming off of the music, which is really cool. So you can check that out. There's a card up here. And yeah, anyway, moving right along. Let's go ahead and get into some behavior motion tracking. I think that'll be something really powerful. So I'll set that up really quick. Actually, I'll just show you. I failed to do this. To import something, you just push Command I, or you can go up to the import button. All right, we're going to import this footage here, and we're going to do some motion tracking. And I have no idea how well this is going to work. So we're just going to try it together. So, oh, and also let's go ahead and set the range longer on this. Let's click this clock, and then we could set this to like 20 seconds, and then we can actually drag the end of that out. There we go. Okay, so I have this scene set up. Let's go ahead and get into some real basic motion tracking in motion. So we are going to add a behavior. So come on up to your behaviors. Make sure your video is selected. Go down to motion tracking and analyze motion. This will create this nice little red dot here, and we're going to want to find a point of high contrast. Now, I haven't really done any testing with this scene, so I don't know how well this is going to work, but we're going to hope for the best. So select your red tracker here and find a point where it's got a lot of contrast. Now, if you're having a hard time finding that, you can push Option, and motion will automatically let you know with these red crosshairs points of high contrast that might work well. Now, this is not guaranteed. This is just a general like, hey, you might want to check this out. So unfortunately, it's not really working in any of the locations that I want to track. So we're just going to set our own. But look for areas that have high contrast. So this point looks like a really good spot of contrast because we've got kind of this cross going on here. So just select that point. And we are going to actually add another tracker by pushing this add button, and this will give us a scale ability by having the two trackers, because it can figure out between the two tracks how much the object needs to grow. So we'll see if we can find another point here. I like to find it on a similar plane. Sometimes you don't get that lucky, but we'll see how this goes. So we have these two. Now there is the look ahead frames, and essentially that is going to look ahead and say, okay, the track needs to look as close to this original frame as possible. So I like to drag it up in most cases, and that generally gets me a better track. Now this track is very temperamental, so there is no guaranteeing, but this is what I do to get the best tracking that I can. So we have our two trackers in the frame. We'll make sure they're both selected here, which they are, and we are going to push analyze. Now, before you do this, make sure your playhead is actually at the front of your frame, and we're going to push analyze, and this will let motion do its thing, and we're going to hope for the best. I'm kind of worried it's not going to work, but it's a very temperamental tracker. It seems to be sticking pretty well, so we might be lucky here. Okay, so it is all done tracking, and it actually looks like it did a really good job, which is rare in motion. So congratulations, Motions, you did it. Okay, we have this tracker. Now, how do we get this motion data onto something? That is pretty easy. Let's go ahead and create a text object here. And we'll just say something really creative like subscribe. I've never done that joke before. Okay, so we are going to go and selecting all of our text here, we can actually go to the appearance modifier here, and we can set the color to something red. And we'll drag the scale up a bit, and we'll do that. Now, we have our subscribe here. Let's go ahead and add a behavior, motion tracking, match move. Now, using this match move modifier, we can actually drag the analyze motion onto our subscribe match move modifier. And so now, this will automatically look at the tracking data and try and analyze it best as possible. Let's hope this works. We also want it to have the scale factor as we are zooming in. So if we look at this, let's see if it did it right. I can't tell. It's not enough motion to tell. It looks like it's moving. Let me see here. So it doesn't look like it's sticking super well to where we put it, and there's a good reason for that. And that's because the anchor point, it's looking at this as the anchor point, but the text is over here, and the text's anchor point is over here. So it's matching what this part of the frame is doing and not so much what's going on over here. So to fix that, I like to put the anchor point exactly where the other anchor point is. So select your text, select the anchor point, and we're going to drag this down to where our anchor point is over here. And this generally gets me a better motion track. That's the number one thing I've discovered that gets me the best motion track I can out of motion. So if we play that back, is that doing anything? It is tracked. It's just not enough motion to really be able to tell. I wonder if we scale this up, maybe we can get a better idea. Okay, so you can see it is tracked into the frame. I should have chosen something that had a little bit more motion, but you can see it is tracked into the frame, and it's doing a pretty good job. Now, if it's not working great for you, you could actually set the anchor point to the other side. So we kind of tracked it. I forgot where we tracked it. I think it was right there. And we'll change our anchor point and rotation and scale to the other side. And that sometimes gets you a little bit better motion. So there's not a lot of motion happening here, but that gives you a general idea of how to get a solid track in motion, and you can kind of work off of that. So hopefully that helps you, and we'll keep on moving on. Okay, so now we are going to get into rigging, which is really, really nice for Final Cut Pro. Now, I do have a lot of tutorials that actually cover this. I will link one of those up here that I think does the best job showing that. But basically what we are going to do is create a rig that allows us to enable or disable this circle. And we can actually also publish the fill color. So what we will do is come on over to your properties. Now we have our opacity here, and this is where I like to allow a checkbox to enable or disable something. So go ahead and go to your opacity, come on down to add to rig, create new rig, and we will do a checkbox. What we will do is when the checkbox is enabled, we want it to be at 100% opacity. When it is disabled, we want it to be at 0%. So now when we enable it, it comes back and disable and it is gone. And that is really nice for in Final Cut Pro when you want to have a rig like that. Alternatively, let's go into our text here. Alternatively, let's go into our fill color. Now the fill color is really nice because you can publish it on its own and you don't have to create a rig. So just come on over to the fill color and we will just go down to publish. And now this will automatically push this into Final Cut Pro once we create it into a like a text object for Final Cut. Okay, so now what we will do to push this, because we started with a motion project, we're gonna push this into a Final Cut title. So come on up to the top left-hand corner, go to File, and then go to Convert Project to, and we will do Title. And there's no need to set a placeholder, so we'll just forget that. So now this is actually a title for Final Cut Pro, and this will be cool. And just to further showcase this, let's go ahead and select our text, add a behavior, and let's do like a text blur in effect. So now that will have this nice blur in effect. Okay, so we have this title, but we want to give the person the ability to enable or disable this little intro animation here. And here, actually, I'll even go to properties. We'll set the scale to 0. And then as the Final Cut Bro thing comes in, we'll set this to 100. There we go. So now this will grow in as it says the Final Cut Bro underneath it. So let's say we want to give somebody the ability to enable or disable this intro for the text layer. We're going to come down to the timeline. We're going to push Shift M. That will create this green marker. Double click that marker, go to type, and we can set the build-in to optional. And now that will give us a checkbox in Final Cut Pro that lets us enable or disable this little fancy intro thing. Now, if we just go on up to File, and we can do Save, because this is a Final Cut title, it will automatically push it into Final Cut. So this template is just going to be tutorial, and the category, I will put it under the Final Cut Bro, but you can put it under whatever you want, and that will categorize it in Final Cut for you to easily find. You can also set a theme if you have a lot of titles that are under the same category, but you want to organize them even more, so you can do that. You can check include unused media, which is handy if you have a lot of images or something within your project and you want to send the project to somebody else. So that can be handy. And you can do save preview movie, which I generally don't need to do, but you can do if you're creating like a plugin or something. So we'll push publish. And now this is already in Final Cut Pro. So let's open up Final Cut. Okay, so we're in Final Cut Pro and we can actually come over to our titles here. And I put it under the Final Cut Bro category. And you'll see that my category is here. So here we go. And it's got this fancy little intro with my name on it. And what's awesome is in Final Cut, the text is actually already animatable. So you can move it around and you can change the scale, do all of that. But we maybe didn't want that intro, so we can come on up to our title options and disable the build in. Now, one thing I forgot was to publish the parameters for this circle. So let's jump on over to motion and we will select our checkbox here, come on up to the top arrow and go down to publish. And now that should be published into Final Cut. We'll save it again with Command S just to be sure. Go on to Final Cut. You'll have to delete your old title, but now we can drag that in. And now you'll see my checkbox here is enable or disable for that circle. So now we just have the text, or we can enable our circle, or we can disable the whole intro and the text, and we could also enable the thing, turn it red, do whatever we want. So that's just a really, really basic way of rigging. Also, anything you name this checkbox will show up in Final Cut. So delete it, bro, will show up with the lowercase o just for added effect. And that should, if it worked properly, name it accordingly. So now it says delete it, bro. So that's just something you can do to create your own plugins and whatnot. So anyway, I think this tutorial has gone on far too long, so I think I better end it here. If you have any questions, please feel free to hit me up down below. Also, if you have any future suggestions for motion, I would love to see those. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this tutorial was outrageously long, but I hope you gained a lot of insight and kind of a nice beginning measure, a nice beginning intro into motion. There is so much functionality in here, and I really strongly suggest that you do not push this program aside, but you actually take some time to learn it, because it will enhance your Final Cut experience to a whole new level if you just take some time to learn it. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I cannot wait to see you next week.